All right, here we are, Rabbi Tuvia Bolton speaking to you from Crown Heights, keeping the classes going. And here is a mimer, a Hasidic discourse, which was given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1976, just 2 days before the holiday of Sukkot, and it commemorates the passing away of the fourth Rebbe of Chabad called Rebbe Shmuel, who's nicknamed the Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Shmuel, and Rebbe, that's the last of the Marash, is Rebbe Shmuel. And he passed away almost 100 years before this. This was Lamed Vav, and the Rebbe reprinted this in 1980, what is it, 1983 or something, 1981. Anyway, commemorating almost 100 years, but it was 100 years from the time when the fourth Rebbe spoke a Hasidic discourse with the same name. Okay, let's just get everything straight over here. This is talking about the holiday of Sukkot. The holiday of Sukkot is one of the three big holidays of the Jewish people. 3 times a year, everybody would go up to the Holy Temple. And if you want, you can look in the book of Leviticus, the 23rd chapter of Leviticus, in what's called Emor. The whole chapter is called, the whole entire chapter is called Emor. And the 23rd paragraph, 23rd, whatever it is, paragraph. And over there, there's sentences with a sentence, there's a whole bunch of sentences that talk about the holiday of Sukkot. And it talks about over there that at the middle of the month of Tishrei, which is this month called the 7th month of the year. The first month of the year is Nisan, that's when Passover comes, and 7 months later is Tishrei, that's the month when it begins with Rosh Hashanah, and 10 days later is Yom Kippur. Rosh Hashanah is New Year's, day that man was created, and Yom Kippur is 10 days later. That was when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies, the day of forgiveness. And 5 days after that is the holiday of Sukkot, and that is a 7-day holiday. See the sounds of New York in the background, just to verify what I said. And this is talking about the holiday of Sukkot. Okay, now all of the Jewish holidays are designed to reveal the Creator in the creation, or more exactly, to reveal the purpose of the Creator in the creation. Why did God make the world? And we, in Hasidic teaches, Chabad teaches especially, that God is not just creating the world way back then, and this is a historical remembrance of this great occasion, that God is creating us right now, every moment, and that takes a certain degree of faith. That can't be comprehended, even though it can be a little bit comprehended, because you can say, well, either we just sort of popped up from nowhere somehow or other, or the world just came from, Big Bang or evolution or something like that. Where the first stuff came from, okay, that's a little bit question. Or we can say God created it. Sort of, could be created it. But to say that the whole world is being created right now for a purpose, that's like really out there. And that God cares about what everybody does, that's even further out. So this can only be connected to, we can only incorporate that in our lives by what's called faith, above understanding. But it's not enough just to live in faith. That's not what God wants, that we live just in faith alone. Because first of all, you're very vulnerable to all sorts of charlatans and fakers, and you believe in God, so you don't really care. Everything's just God, so just do whatever. Then there's the idea, that's the second of the 10 commandments, idolatry. Don't worship idols. And this is a very, very when a person really connects to God, he's connected to his creator. God is creating us. So when you do that, you feel happy. You feel a certain liveliness, life, happiness. And that's the holiday of Sukkot. Sukkot is taking this big, general, incomprehensible concept that God is creating me right now with a purpose that he loves me, he cares about me, and bringing this into my day-to-day life, into my feelings, into my emotions, into my love, that you really feel that my life is coming from somewhere. And it's coming from even more someone, if you can call God, when God is one, right? We're created in God's image. So it comes from someone who cares about me. And every human being can say this. And when you feel that you're not alone and that you're being created, so even though it's pretty, freaky to say a thing like that, but on the other hand, it's pretty happy. And that's the idea of the Jewish people, to make a happy, meaningful world, not just out there, religion, but to make this physical world good, to bring this feeling. So that's called the Sukkah, sort of the big thing that surrounds us. And then the lulav and etrog, we take that's coming inside. So let's go. Here we go. Okay, so we have this holiday of Sukkot, and there are a lot of unique things in the holiday, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And one of them is, like we said, we sit in this sukkah, we sit in this booth in the nighttime. That's the first thing we do. And in the morning, they take lulav and etrog, shake it. And they also had the water drawing ceremony. Remember, we learned a sikha from the speech of the Rebbe about that. The water drawing ceremony, which water signifies above understanding, no taste, no color. And they also brought 70 oxes. They sacrificed 70 oxes on the altar. Each day they sacrificed an average of 7. They didn't really say. They sacrificed 7 oxes. So each day they sacrificed, an average of 10. 70 oxes. Each day they sacrificed 10, but really they didn't sacrifice 10. The first day they sacrificed 13, and the last day they sacrificed 7. So it came out in general, the first day was 13, and then 12, then 11, then the middle day was 10, and then 9, 8, 7. So it came out to be altogether 70 oxes, and that corresponds to the 70 nations. So let's get to this, right? So it means the whole world is supposed to be happy. It's all in the hands of the Jews. All right, let's go. Ready? Yes. We'll just do a couple of chapters, and I'll try to find time, and we'll do more. Bisya that Beit Samachtar. Bisya, with the help of God, Yud Gimel, the 13th day of Tishrei, which is the Hilula, the day of the passing of Admor Marash, of the Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Shmuel. In, what was it, 1883. Passed away. This is right before Sukkot. The Rebbe said this in Tafshin Lamed Vav, which was 1971, 76. B'Sukkot teishvu shivat yamim. Here's the sentence from the Bible. B'Sukkot teishvu shivat yamim. In Sukkot, you should sit for 7 days. Kol Ezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu b'Sukkot. Let's just say the sentence. Every citizen of Israel should sit in Sukkot. Laman, in order, Yedu should know, Dorotechem, your generations, the future generations, Ki, that, Besukot, Oshavti, that in Sukkot I made sit at Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people, Botzi Otam Meretz Mitzrayim, when I took them out of Egypt. In these Sukkot, there's two different opinions, but the main one is that this is talking about the clouds of glory that surrounded the Jewish people. Okay, so let's do this again. Let's go. B'Sukkot teishvu shivat yamim. In Sukkot, you should sit for 7 days, and it adds another commandment. It says Sukkot, you should sit 7 days. That's it. That's the commandment. No, doesn't end that. It says more. Now you have to remember who wrote the Bible. God. God dictated this to Moses, and Moses wrote it all down. And you can say, well, maybe Moses made the whole thing up, which you could certainly say that, but it would be very difficult because 3 million people, at least that's what Judaism claims, 3 million people saw and heard God face to face. They all heard God and saw God whatever that means, speak. It says their souls jumped out of their bodies. But nevertheless, there was no doubt that it was God doing it, and it was not the Wizard of Oz or something like that. You ever see the movie? Wizard of Oz is a little guy sitting in a room, making all these levers and pushing these buttons and everything, and making all this noise and fire and everything. But really, just some guy. Everyone knew that it was God. They felt that their Creator was speaking, not just a man in the mountain or something. That everyone felt their Creator, and that their Creator was speaking. You feel your Creator. You know you're being created. Well, I also don't feel it, but when they got him Mount Sinai, they felt it. You think it helped? 40 days later, they also worshiped the golden calf. But let's not wreck it. Let's go. Here we go. Sukkot, and let's go back to the commandment. Sukkot teishvu shivat yamim. On Sukkot, God said to the Jewish people, in Sukkot, you should sit for 7 days. And it adds on another commandment. Every citizen of Israel, in other words, every Jewish person, should sit in a sukkah. Why has to say twice? The Rebbe will explain. In Sukkot, you should sit 7 days, and every citizen of Israel should sit in a sukkah, so every Jewish person should sit in a sukkah. And the reason is, here it's not talking about Ezra B'Yisrael, and the land of Israel. It's talking about all the Jewish people. The Jewish people are also called Yisrael, right? Vatam, and the reason, what's the reason that you should sit in a sukkah? Laman yedu dorotechem, so that the future generation should know b'sukkot hoshavti, that in Sukkot I made sit the Jewish people when I took them out of Egypt. Good? That's what the Bible says. That's what God says. Makes no sense. It would have been enough just to say in Sukkot, sit 7 days. That's all. Just do it. God said, I'm telling you to do it. But God doesn't leave it at that. There must be something more to this message that meets the eye, because God continues and says every citizen of the Jewish people should sit in a sukkah. In order your future generations should know that I made the Jewish people sit in Sukkot when I took them out of Egypt. And just as a parenthetical statement, going out of Egypt is a basic essence of Judaism, right? There's no other religion or philosophy or nation or race or science fiction book or anything that even makes such a claim. A whole entire nation, God, the creator of the world, took a whole entire nation, 3 million people, 600,000 just men alone, above the age of 20, and took them all over Egypt. So you don't get that every day. But you do them, it's okay. Here we go. Let's go. But anyway, God made them sit in Sukkot so that the future generations will remember that God took them out of Egypt, because the Sukkah that represents these clouds that surrounded the Jews for the 40 years they were in the desert. But you do him, it's known at Diukim Bezeh, it is known the implications of all of these words, these extra words, and this in the Maimari Rebbe Zeno Nisieno, in the essays of the previous Rebbes of Chabad. First of all, let's start off with what says the Baal HaHilula, the one who's passing away, we're celebrating, because the Rebbe said this, commemorating the passing of this fourth Rebbe of Chabad, Rebbe Shmuel. He said, Sukkah is the idea of shalom, of peace. We say this in the Shabbat prayers. Spread over us the sukkah, the booth, the canopy of peace. I guess a canopy is just over our heads, but the sukkah means, okay, the main thing of the sukkah, by the way, is what's over your head. So the canopy of peace, God said. So sukkah, this you're sitting is for peace. Peace. But sort of we have to understand, what's the connection of sukkah to peace? In the 7 days of sukkah, there are many topics. I told you about a few of them. Here are a few more. Which are relevant to this idea of sitting in the sukkah for 7 days. For instance, there's the mitzvah of taking the four types of vegetation. It says that right before the sentence. Like it says, "Ulakachtem lochem b'yom rishon." I'm mishadrin. Say it. There's a connection to Sukkah. What's the connection to the four types? Anybody who doesn't know the four types, I should have brought this up before, but anyway, you look it up. What are the four types on Sukkah? What do you take this as? A lulav, right? Type in Google lulav. Lulav is the big central branch of a palm tree, and then you take an etrog, which it's a yellow fruit. It's pretty expensive, also. Okay, you do it like it's known a mitzvah mina muvcha, that the best mitzvah is to take the four types. They should be taken in the sukkah. The gam yesh b'zayin yamei sukkos, and also the 7 days of sukkah. There is the sacrifices. They sacrifice 70 oxes, which that corresponds to the 70 nations of the world, like it says in the Midrash. And this is also now. How is it now? We make sacrifices? No, we talk about it. Like it says in the Shalma Parin Sefotenu, that our utterances of our mouth are in the place of the oxes, or befraten, especially like what it says in the Shalma, what it says that will be completed. Our lips now complete these sacrifices. What does it mean completed? It means that they will tashlumim. It doesn't mean they are in the place of, right? And like I owe you $50, and instead of that, I'll give you a fish or something, right? That's mishalmim, tashlumin. Ella, but it means lesson shlemos. That when we speak about the sacrifices, in some ways, this is even better, more complete than the sacrifices. Now, even in the time of exile, by means of saying these sentences, we talk about the 70 oxes that we sacrificed back then this completes it. I mean, one of the reasons, if you want to call it, that the temple was destroyed was because all of the work that had to be done in the temple, by the temple, was completed. And now what we do by repeating and talking about and learning about the temple and the sacrifices, that this adds a certain completion to what was done back then. Even though that now in the time of exile, since Shepu'ula is only by means of our speaking, it's not recognized so much in a physical way. And the main point of the Jewish people is to do physical things. Allah has come much more so in the physicality of the world. And nevertheless, because it says that when we move our lips, it is treated as though we're doing the deed, and we can't do the deed anymore. The main thing is doing the deed, right? We're praying 3 times a day that God should bring us the third temple. Huh? We should bring the temple. That God should return Yerushalayim, Yeruchot Tashuv, that God should dwell in Yerushalayim, in the Holy Temple. Like it says in Long Lathe in the Tanya, that the main thing is doing deeds. That's the unique thing about Judaism, is that we have commandments, physical commandments. There's no religion or philosophy or whatever in the world that has commandments. They have rituals and they have whatever it is, their ceremonies, but they don't have any commandments directly from God, and we do. And one of the main commandments was the sacrifices. And now we can't do that actual sacrifice, but we can do, in place of the sacrifice, we can talk about them. Harigam Akshav, so now also the pula of the Shlemos, now we are completing what was lacking in the sacrifices back then. We're completing it spiritually. We're doing a little bit by moving our lips and talking about it. So that's what are we even dealing with this? The 70 oxes that were sacrificed was in order to bring peace and blessing to the non-Jews, to the Gentiles, the 70 nations as they're called. We have to understand, my sheikhs, what's the connection with all of these things together, the taking of the 4 types and the sacrifices of the 70 oxen to the idea of the sukkah? Why do we do it in Sukkot? And to like we said, the idea of peace. Why? Hine kasher Yom Tov Rishon, when the first day of the holiday falls to be on Shabbat, like it's going to be this year. The Kavir Shanazu, like it is in C, Yesh Chiluk, there's a difference between when it was in the temple and now the time of exile. Like for instance, like it is, for instance, the sounding of the shofar and Rosh Hashanah, when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, like it also did on this year. The same day Rosh Hashanah falls out, Sukkot falls out, because it's exactly 2 weeks later. Over Mikdash in the Holy Temple, they would sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, but not in the rest of Israel. Shebezaman Abayit, and also the same thing with Lulav and Etrog, that in the time of Lulav, when there was the Holy Temple, on the first day of Lulav and Etrog, it would Chag Lulav Doche Shabbat Av B'Gavulim. They would take Lulav, like this year, when there was the Holy Temple, so they would take the Lulav and the Etrog. We don't do it now on Shabbat, but back then they did take the Lulav when it fell on Shabbat. Av B'Gavulim means even outside of the Holy Temple. Now that the Holy Temple was destroyed, so the Lulav does not push off Shabbat. This year, for instance, we're not going to take Lulav and Etrog on the first day of the holiday because it falls on Shabbat. But when there was a Holy Temple, it did. Okay. Nekudat Habir, the main point of the explanation is like this. Sukkah is peace. Therefore, on Sukkah, it is relevant to the non-Jews, and on Sukkah, we take the Lulav and Etrog and the Sukkah. Why? Because the Sukkah is the idea of a makif, of a surrounding level. I talked about that in the beginning, right before when we started the class. Makif means, in human person experience, faith. Faith, a genuine, general feeling that something is more real than I am, that something is creating me. And that I don't really exist, and I'm being created, and I'm being created by something that's bigger. Okay, now a normal person listening to me say this will say, I mean, a person like that has to be put into an institution or something. That is, that's simply not normal. What you feel that you're not really existing, you're not really real. So, I mean, a person that said that would actually be right if what that implied was that I am fooling myself and thinking that I exist. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying like this: I, of course, exist. God is creating me. God exists. I agree, I exist. But there's an existence that's much more real than mine. In other words, my existence is much more important and stable than I can possibly imagine, because God himself is creating me. And it's with his will that I exist. So I'm not just existing, by the merit of atoms or in the forces of nature, which can change in 1 second, and that's it. I'm just, atoms fall apart. Who knows? And even if they don't fall apart, that there's no meaning to the whole business. I mean, I'm just a big atom, just a big conglomerate of carbon atoms or some combustion or whatever it's called. So there's no meaning. Here we're saying that God creates me means that I'm infinitely more real and important than I can possibly imagine, because God himself is creating me. And this is not just me, it's everybody. Everyone can say this, but that feeling is makif. It's surrounding. Right? How can I feel more stable with something I don't even understand? So that feeling, general feeling that God is creating me, is creating everything, this is incomprehensible. That's called a surrounding feeling. And that's symbolized by the sukkah. And on the other hand, it's a very happy feeling. We'll see, we have to make it more, how do you say, personalized, like they say. It has to be more relevant to me and my personal life, how I deal with my children, how I deal with my wife, how I deal with my debts, how I deal with my, my health, how I deal with my next door neighbor that makes noise, how I deal with my car that doesn't work, how I deal with, etc. How I deal in the day-to-day reality of life, how I have to make things, I have to improve things, I have to do things. What's this? if I'm neutralized to God, it doesn't mean so. It has to come into my personal life. We'll talk about that's going to be the thing of the lulav and etrog. We'll see. Taking it into your heart. Okay, so sukkah, that represents this idea of makif, how God hugs us, embraces us, creates us. He's more real than we are. And not like a makif of a lavush. Okay, so there's makif between us. God is infinitely more not understandable than what we think. Like I said before, that God creates me, so you can say, okay, could be, could be. I mean, I'm coming from somewhere. Here I am. In some ways, it makes some sort of, if you're a religiously inclined person or whatever, so it sort of makes sense to say that, I'm coming from something. Not creating myself. So maybe it's God. So that makes a little bit of sense. But to say that God cares about me and that he's infinitely real, infinite, this is what's called a makif that's above a garment. A makif of a garment means God's a little bit understandable. It's a little bit, here I am, something's creating me, so maybe it's God, could be. That's what's called a makif, a garment, a close makif, a close surrounding. In other words, it's incomprehensible, but it's sort of near comprehension. You could sort of like argue with the evolutionists or whatever. You got what to argue about, right? There's these people. I just saw somebody that he's a biologist or a chemist or whatever, and he says that it's impossible that the world could have been created in several billion years because the process of making this amino acids or whatever, it has to be done quickly. It has to be done quickly, so it can't be taken a million years. It has to, whatever. Doesn't make any difference. Anyway, that's arguable. But to say that God really cares, and that's just not even arguable. That just doesn't make any sense at all. That's what's called a faraway makif. She'imi yosef b'chinas makif, even though it's a surrounding level, like we said with a garment, yesh bo ischalkus. There's different levels of this close faith, makif alavush, of the garment. Faith that's close. Lavushia rosh, the head, the body, the feet, which is not the case of sukkah. Sukkah is ein bo ischalkus. In the sukkah, we're talking about a type of a faith that's all embracing. It embraces all logic. It's above all understanding, all religious logic, or whatever. Shahari hu makif arosh v'ruba. It surrounds. We have to go into sukkah. It says it has to surround a bare minimum your head and the majority of your body. That's the law. The intention, what it means, it's like his whole entire head and his whole body. The head and the body and the feet are one. In other words, the highest level of your being and the lowest level of your being are all the same. According to this, we have to understand, why does it say B'sukkos teshvu that you should sit in a sukkah? Like many places. Okay, it talks about another mimer by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's father, the fifth Lubavitcher. Okay, so if it says it's a Sukkot means incomprehensible. Above, it's senseless to say it's incomprehensible. Huh? Like it's saying, mathematics is so big, I tried to grab it with a big bag. No matter how big bag I brought it to university, and I had about a high ladder. I went up this high ladder, and I figured I'd get high mathematics. So I went up to the top floor, and I put a ladder on the roof, and I took this big bag, and I grabbed the guy. I'll think you're nuts. You can't grab ideas with a bag. Or you can't ideas. It's not the same garment. It's not the same. You can't grasp it with your mind, maybe. But with a bag, you can't get the same thing. God, your mind is not the proper vessel for understanding God. So God is the surrounding level. You can't bring it into a being settled. That's what it means, Sukkot teshvu. The whole commandment of Sukkot is that you have to bring this completely incomprehensible aspect of God that he cares into your day-to-day life, that you really feel it. According to the Tanya, 9th chapter, other places, if you really start thinking about God and how close God is and how God loves us, and you really start to realize this is really for real, then you have love. You break out in love. You have a tremendous love for God, an tremendous emotional feeling for God. So that means loving God, that's an internal feeling, and having this general, but you're loving God, right? God is incomprehensible. How can you love God? Doesn't make any sense. What's there to love? You can negate yourself to him. You can, bow down to the Lord or something like that. But how can you love? You have an emotion. You can fear God. Well, God is awesome. He can send you to hell, something like that. But how can you actually feel love for God? God, as we're saying here, is incomprehensible. And we're not talking about just how I love God because God keeps me alive. God keeps me this, right? I mean, God keeps everybody alive. So, you can say, God's not keeping me alive. Nature is keeping me alive. That's also a little bit of surrounding. But here we're talking about loving the aspect of God that's totally incomprehensible. That's called bringing the makif into an inside. Therefore, that's what it means. In Sukkot, you have to make dwell. So what is the idea of Sukkot Teshvu? You have to dwell in the Sukkah. And also this is Sukkot, in the Sukkah. You have to be in the Sukkah, and it was inside of this total incomprehensible aspect of God, and you have to bring it into your day-to-day life, like money. Like you like money. You know what money is? You can tell the difference between somebody gives you a $1 bill and they give you $100 bills, or they give you a stack of $100 bills, or they give you a stack of tissue paper. You know the difference? Oh yeah, you sure do, right? Sure do. Here a person says, "Here's a present, birthday present," gives you a stack of tissue papers. Say, "What in the world is this? What are you doing?" So, "Oh, I'm sorry, I gave the wrong one." Says, "I should have given you a stack of dollars." Says, "Dollars. Oh, that's nice. $100 bills. That's a lot better, than a stack of tissue paper." You can really feel that. You feel that it really means something. How can we really feel godliness like we feel money? And it says, "Become mildecha." You're supposed to. So that's what Sukkot is supposed to do. We'll see. Inyan zeh hityashvu b'sukkah, to take the sukkah, which is a surrounding level, and bring it into a settled way that it's really valuable to us. Omer, it says 3 times. How does it say? Look, let's go back to our sentence. B'sukkot teshvu, in Sukkot you should make dwell. Every dweller in Israel, yeshvu b'sukkot. Every citizen of it will sit in a sukkah. There it is again, 3rd time. And the 3rd time is in order that your future generations will know that in Sukkot, Hoshavdi, I made sit the Jewish people. So 3 times, Sukkot Teshvu, Ezrach Yeshvu b'Sukkot, and Sukkot Hoshavdi 3 times, settling. Why 3 times? We'll see. Right, it says the 3 times. Oh. Also, and we have to understand, why does it say, in order that the future generations will know that I made you sit in the sukkah? Shetam, the sukkah, is the reason that I may say you should sit in sukkot now, is in order that the future generations, doors are born, they will know that in sukkot, I made the Jewish people sit in the sukkah when I took them out of Egypt. That's what it says in the sentence, right? Since the commandment of sukkah is not a commandment which depends on the land of Israel, and it's not one of the commandments which depend on the time of the Holy Temple. Therefore, the Jewish people will do it all the time. We do sukkah now. We're in New York. So what does it mean? In order the future generations will know what God is telling Moses, this is the generation that came out of Egypt. You have to sit in Sukkot, so that the future generations will know that I took the Jews out of Egypt. Why will they know that I took you out of Egypt? Because you, Moses, your generation now is going to sit in Sukkot. That's not the reason why. We're sitting in the Sukkot right now. We're not. The reason we know that God took the Jews out of Egypt is because we're sitting in the Sukkot, me and you, right now. Not because Moses did it back then, or the first generation that went out. The Torah will never be changed. If so, the knowledge of the future generations that God took them out of Egypt is because they themselves are going to, they themselves will sit in the sukkah. What does it mean? God spoke to Moses and said, your generation has to sit in a sukkah so that the future generations will know that I made them sit in sukkah. Now, what does that mean? But maybe you can say, well, it started off the chain, that Moses did it, and then the future generations will also do it. So also say that. You should sit in the sukkah so that the future generations will sit in the sukkah. But don't say that you will sit in the sukkah so the future generations will know that I took the Jews out of Egypt. The future generations will not know that I took them out of Egypt because Moses sat in the sukkah. They'll know because they themselves are sitting in the sukkah. And they're reading in the Torah that God said every Jew, all generations have to sit in sukkah. That's why they'll do it. Not because Moses sat in the sukkah, because we're sitting in the sukkah right now. That reminds us. Okay, so up to now, we've got a lot of questions. What about the answers? We'll get to that next time, but let's do one or two lines. The explanation is like this. A sukkah, like we said before, is a surrounding level. And it says, B'chesed liyom chagenu, that everything which was covered up on the days before Yom Chagenu, before Sukkot, they become revealed in Sukkot. Let's just take a couple lines. For instance, the idea of the shofar, which is in Rosh Hashanah, that the commandment of the day of Rosh Hashanah, the main commandment is to sound the shofar, right? This sounding the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, this arouses something in the upper worlds, and it is not revealed. When is it revealed? It's revealed on the holiday of Sukkot. Where is it revealed? It says in the schach of the sukkah, in the canopy, in the covering, the roof of the sukkah. Where do we see this? And we'll say this and we'll finish this. That schach, all the Sukkot that says is called the commandment of sukkah, comes from the word schach. The word schach means the covering. The walls are not called a sukkah. What's called a sukkah is the covering of the sukkah. The covering of the sukkah has to be made from plants and things that are vegetation that's cut off from the ground. It's been separated from the ground. Okay, so schach is the numerical value of 100. 60, 20, and 20. 60, samach is 60, chaf is 20, 20. 100. That's 100. Remember that number, 100. That's the gematria of 100. This corresponds to the 100 sounds of the shofar that the Jewish people sound on Rosh Hashanah. Right? What do we sound? We sound we sound 3 times, and we do that 3 times. So if so, it comes out that we sound 4 blasts. Tkiya, Teruah, Shvorim, and Tkiya. That's 4. We do that 3 times. That's 12. Then after that, we sound Tkiya, Shvorim, Tkiya 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Then 3 times 3 again is 9. And if you add up all the times, we do this 3 times. If you add up all the times that we sound the shofar, right, we do that whole thing 3 times, it comes out to be 100. Also, the individual sounds that we sound in the shofar, you're going to have to write this down, you'll see. There are 60 times that we made dood. There's 20 times we do shvorim, dood, dood, dood. And there's 20 times that we do trua, dood, 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 dood. So from these 100 blasts that we sound, so 60 of them are tekiyas, 20 of them are shvorim, and 20 of them are trua. That's how it comes out. And so that comes out to be the gematria of 100, which that's the schach, that's the covering of the sukkah. So what was hidden spiritually on Rosh Hashanah, we just aroused it doesn't come down to begin to be revealed, all these blessings, only on Sukkot. Same thing is in the Ketorah, the cloud of incense on Yom Kippur. The high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, and there he went in with coals and with incense. He would go into the Holy of Holies and he would put the incense on the coals, and it would fill up with smoke. This smoke, which was revealed on Yom Kippur, of the smoke of Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies, it was a very high level of smoke. That's like the same type of smoke that Moses, when he went up on Mount Sinai, says he went into the cloud, something like that. But it becomes revealed b'Yom Chagenu on Sukkot. Like it says that the schach, the covering of the sukkah, comes from the cloud of the incense on Yom Kippur. How is this going to be? We'll talk about this, God willing, next time. Thank God we got this as far as we did. And this is going to be the idea of making peace. Peace essentially comes when everybody feels that they're being created and that they're being created for a purpose. And the holiday that accomplishes this is the holiday of Sukkot. God willing, we'll continue this at the first opportunity that I have a little bit of quiet. And who knows, maybe that'll even be tonight. Have a good day and a good holiday with Mashiach now.